When that train derailed in East Palestine, it wasn't because Trump deregulated the brakes. These aren't news stories. They're storylines pumped into your bubble. 4, always be aware that once the news became a profit division of media companies, they stopped being in the news business and are now in the audience stroking business. The goal is no longer to inform opinions, it's to reinforce them. 3, if your news outlet consistently reduces everything that happens in the world to who the president of America is, get rid of it. It's just thoughtless, reflexive team politics.
Bill Maher is once again taking aim at the mainstream media, accusing major news organizations of turning nearly every story into a full-scale crisis. In today's media environment, networks such as CNN and MSNBC are often criticized for transforming routine events into constant breaking news in order to attract viewers. Maher, who has never hesitated to challenge that approach, recently condemned what he sees as persistent bias, especially in coverage involving Donald Trump and the Republican Party. His criticism was direct, passionate, and completely unfair.
News Nation reported this year that the U.S. was on track for nearly a 300% increase in measles cases. 300%? Wow, that sounds like it could be millions. It was 35, because they just want to manipulate you into clicking. Look, I have 10 fingers. You want to see me suddenly have 80% less? Okay. 5, never trust the initial reports. The media cares way more about being first than being right. They love a scoop, but it's a scoop of because it always turns out to be wrong.
Maher begins by focusing on the Democratic Party's recently released analysis of the 2024 election results. From the start, he questions the timing. In his view, a party eager to regain political momentum should not be releasing a post-election review so long after the fact. Such a report, he argues, would have been more useful much earlier. With the 2026 midterm elections approaching and preparations for the 2028 presidential race already underway, Maher believes Democrats should be concentrating on future strategy rather than revisiting past mistakes. Every month spent analyzing previous losses is, in his view, time that could be used to rebuild support and strengthen the party's position.
You have to care about the truth. The media doesn't care about it because they know you don't care, that you just want to hear your side. So at some point you need to take a step back, look around, and be really honest. Are you actually as your news feed tells you are? Are you miserable? Some people are, and we should help them. Are you destitute? Some people are. We should help them. But most people who take the subway get to work alive. Most don't fall out of a plane.
Maher points to a memorable interview involving Adam Schiff as an example of a broader issue he sees within Democratic politics. During the conversation, Maher repeatedly pressed Schiff for a clear answer regarding the necessity of military involvement in the Middle East. According to Maher, direct responses were difficult to obtain until sustained questioning left little room for avoidance. He argues that this reflects a wider pattern in which difficult truths are acknowledged only when circumstances make them impossible to ignore. Maher draws a parallel to concerns about President Biden's cognitive abilities, which critics raised long before party leaders publicly addressed them. In his view, warning signs were visible for an extended period, yet concerns were often dismissed until they became politically unavoidable. Maher argues that acknowledging problems only after they become impossible to deny is not genuine leadership, but rather delayed damage.
Would absolutely blow up the world on day one of term 2. He's a dangerous, erratic, insane, awful person, and I'd love to help him get not elected. But he didn't actually start World War III last time, or nuke a hurricane, or trade Puerto Rico for Greenland. Sure, sure, the sequel is usually worse, but until he does, I'm going to live my life, and not the one the media wants me to live, hating half the country and my pants 24/7. Is the sky really falling? I don't know. Maybe. And maybe it's just the door from a Boeing airplane. It's time for the media to admit that they blew the whole thing way out of proportion, because as always with media these days, they don't cover what's most important, just what's most fun to watch. There are 15.2 million college students in the U.S., and 2,300 have been arrested. That's 1/67th of 1%, and half of the ones in New York weren't even students. But we were given the false impression that these protesters are the voice of their generation, having found a cause for which they were willing to go to the tents and to the barricades. Oh, please, these kids are more violent when their team wins a championship.
Maher also expresses skepticism about politicians who reveal major truths only after leaving public office. He notes that many former officials eventually publish memoirs filled with revelations about events they witnessed while in power. While these disclosures often generate attention and commercial success, Maher questions why the same information was not shared when it might have influenced public debate. The platforms, audiences, and opportunities to speak openly already existed. Yet many politicians remain silent until the risks associated with honesty have largely disappeared. In Maher's view, this creates the appearance that truth is being treated as a commodity rather than a public responsibility. He argues that voters have every reason to question why important information surfaces only after careers.
The vast majority just want to do what they went to college for in the first place, to experiment with being a lesbian. But when these kids chant, "The whole world is watching," they're right. But only because you assholes with the cameras won't show anything else. Isn't there a bear in a swimming pool somewhere you should be covering?
Maher insists that many of the issues Democrats are now discussing were identified long before any official review of the election was conducted. Critics, independent commentators, and ordinary voters have been raising similar concerns for years. According to this perspective, the party's losses in 2024 were not the result of some mysterious political calculation, but rather the consequence of embracing positions that many Americans viewed as disconnected from everyday life. Maher argues that voters did not need extensive polling, expert panels, or lengthy reports to recognize the problem. In his view, the warning signs were visible long before election night. The challenge was not a lack of information, but a reluctance to accept what many people were already saying.
I thought as a public service, since it's so hard to find reliable news these days, tonight I would provide a few rules of thumb for trying to follow the news in our modern age. Starting with, if the headlines in your preferred news outlet routinely feature words like shreds, destroys, pummels, bashes, your outlet is a partisan piece of shit. Either that or you're reading a Batman comic. Ditto with obliterates, roasts, annihilates, and owns. You're supposed to be a source for information, not Nikki Glaser at the Tom Brady roast.
Maher also questions whether some Democratic politicians who now present themselves as centrists have genuinely changed their views. He argues that what appears to be moderation may simply be a reaction to political pressure and declining electoral support. According to this criticism, some figures move toward the center only when polling numbers weaken and electoral setbacks become more likely. Maher suggests that if political conditions improve, many of those same individuals could quickly return to their previous positions. Meanwhile, he believes significant portions of the Democratic establishment remain committed to ideas that have already proven unpopular with many voters. In his view, the party faces a difficult choice between defending certain ideological positions and expanding its appeal to a broader
news source that quotes the internet or writes Twitter says, or a bunch of hacks too lazy to do real journalism. You can pretend you wrote a piece on the zeitgeist, but what you really did was look on your phone and quote the 3 angriest people with the most time on their hands.
Maher points to California as an example of what he considers a larger failure of political self-reflection. The state faces a variety of well-documented challenges, including high living costs, homelessness, infrastructure concerns, and the departure of some residents and businesses. Critics argue that these problems are connected to long-term political decisions that have gone largely unchallenged by influential leaders. Maher contends that many figures within California's political establishment are reluctant to openly discuss the deeper causes of these issues until electoral pressure forces the conversation. Only when public dissatisfaction becomes impossible to ignore do some leaders begin acknowledging problems that have existed for years. According to Maher, California's difficulties did not emerge suddenly, but developed gradually over time, while many people in positions of influence chose not to